Hello, this is the 52 Nifty Bookish Q's tag by Stripped Cover Lit. 52 Nifty Bookish Q's tag original stripped cover lit. Okay, what book are you reading right now? I already showed you. It's Star Trek Riptide by Paul S. Kemp. The audiobook I'm listening to now is Phasma, part of the canon, the new Disney canon, Star Wars Legends. So I'm actually reading two books right now, but that's the way that plays out. What was the last thing I highlighted? Probably nothing. The Bible, maybe 15 years ago when I was still involved in that stuff. Yeah, the Bible. I don't do it anymore. My teachers in school actually had trouble having me write in workbooks because I didn't like to write in books. So that's that. Number 3, what do you plan to read next? One of hundreds of books. I have no idea. I never plan out my next book. It usually just happens. So there's that. One fiction writer, living or dead, with which I would like to grab a drink. Probably Harry Turtledove, which is an alternate history writer. I think it'd be fun to sit down with him and kind of pick his mind apart. So definitely Harry Turtledove. If not him, Robert Conroy. He's another alternative history author who passed away a while back, but his stuff's pretty good. He wrote like stuff about the 1812 and Red Inferno and stuff like that. One poet, living or dead, with which I would like to grab a drink. So this pretty much sums up every accomplished Roman and Greek in the classical world. So who in the classical world would I like to have sat down and listened and talked to? Probably Nero, because he played his fiddle as Rome burned. My Latin's not very good, but it would be fun to sit and talk to Nero, who was not a very good poet, but you didn't specify. 7, one booktuber with which I would like to grab a drink. Todd the Librarian. I think that would be fun. So yeah, I'd like to grab a drink with Todd the Librarian, because he messaged me and made me aware of this book tag. Number 8, Emily Dickinson or Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe. He's brooding and dark and creepy and just would be fun to sit down and have a drink with. Oh, it didn't say have a drink with. It just said Emily Dickinson or Edgar Allan Poe. But I already said it, so nevermore, right? Hemingway or Fitzgerald. Definitely Ernest Hemingway. He lived an accomplished life for being someone with some severe mental illnesses. And hey, I wouldn't mind going down to the Florida Keys and down there where he lived and hanging out with him. He was, in all intents and purposes, Ernest Hemingway was most definitely a badass. Probably a bigger badass than most people alive today. Harris or Hitchens, neither of them. I don't know if they mean Thomas Harris, or probably, I don't know. If it's Thomas Harris, then yeah. Hitchens, there's like 3 authors with the last name, and there's like a dozen authors with the last name Harris. I have no clue which one they're referencing here. They're just 2 last names at this point. Stephen King or Michael Crichton? Probably Stephen King. Let's go with the whore factor, because he's got a mind that only a mother could love, or millions of fans. You decide. Bret Easton Ellis or Chuck Palahniuk? Probably Kurt Vonnegut. There. Just because. Shakespeare's poems or plays? His plays. Definitely his plays. His poems are good, but his plays are better. What's my favorite play by Edgar Allan Poe? The Tempest. I love The Tempest. That's his favorite piece by him. Number 16, Adrian Fort or Dalton Gentry. No idea who they are. Cormac McCarthy or J.K. Rowling. Well, I'd probably say McCarthy, but I'm thinking the senator that was always trying to hunt down communists at this point, so probably him. I'd rather have a drink with him in the 1950s and 60s than with J.K. Rowling today. Does that say anything? Yeah. Although I know that's not who they referenced. But Hannibal Lecter or Voldemort? What is up with Harry Potter? I find it disturbing. I've read one of his plays. I think it was Fantastic. One of her plays, Fantastic Beasts. I liked Fantastic Beasts because it took like an hour to read. And the rest of them I just think are filler. I don't like the storyline. I don't like the plot. The books are awful. I just don't like it. It's not even good fantasy. Terry Brooks is good fantasy. J.K. Rowling just freaks of plagiarism. It might not be, but she stole a lot from a lot of people to make those books. So that's just my opinion, but I don't like J.K. Rowling. She's a plagiarist. In my deep subconscious, that comes to mind every time. So there's that. Oh, it was Hannibal Lecter or Voldemort. I went way off topic. Hannibal Lecter, definitely. I just make sure not to be very rude while I have whatever he's cooking. And hopefully it's not a friend for dinner. T.C. Boyle or George Saunders, don't know who they are. I don't read that stuff. Good writing or good story. Aren't they the same thing? I would think so. Good writing and a good story usually are exactly the same thing, because in my mind I'm thinking good writing is a good story. A good story, what is that? I sit and have a drink with somebody at a bar, and they're telling me how they got arrested for disorderly conduct. But it's a good story. I have no idea the reference. This makes no sense. It's just out there. There's not enough detail in any of these questions. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean, but there's no detail. There's no, like, last names. There's like there's a dozen writers I can think of offhand that have the last name Harris. I don't know. Good writing or a good story, they're both the same thing. So young adult or children's lit, I'd have to say young adult, because that's when I really started reading. But then again, I never really read young adult. I mean, I went straight from reading Cat in a Hat to 50,000 Leagues Under the Sea. There's occasionally good young adult stories, but I don't know. Irony or humor, I like a good irony. Who doesn't like a good irony, but a good humor? Stuff I read, there's occasionally humor in it, but usually it's irony. I mean, dark side, light side, Star Trek, sci-fi. That's usually always irony of some sort. So I'll go with irony. Sci-fi or horror, definitely sci-fi. I'm a huge sci-fi fan. I have like 80 Star Trek books behind me, which I literally just got at the library book sale. I was going to do a haul video, but then I realized it looked cluttered and I just needed to get it done. So there's that. Definitely sci-fi. Star Trek, Star Wars, Alan Dean Foster, Robert Heinlein. They're good authors. They're my favorite, among my favorites. Fantasy or nonfiction? Well, is it just fantasy or is it fiction, nonfiction? See, there's another problem with that questioning. Fiction, does it say fantasy or nonfiction? So are they talking about fantasy as a genre, or are they talking nonfiction? Because if they're talking about fantasy as a genre, then I definitely will go with nonfiction. Once again, it's not detailed enough, it makes no sense, and you can tell I'm getting too used to reading contracts. But fantasy or nonfiction, I don't understand the context. Would I rather find a new favorite contemporary writer or a new favorite old-time great? I will have to say probably a new favorite old-time great, because tried and true, if their books are able to be found and they're still being published, then their stuff's probably good. Don't get me wrong, I like the occasional indie author, but tried and true is usually the best way, right? Sonnet or haiku. I read a lot of haikus online, so definitely I like haikus. They're a very good form. Sestina or Villanelle, neither. I don't know what they are. I actually looked them up, and that's how relevant it was. I looked them up 20 minutes ago, and I forgot what they are at this point. So there's that. Spend the evening at a library or a bookstore. Let's say a library, because I'm cheap. Magazine or Wikipedia article. Magazines create excess clutter, so I'll say a Wikipedia article. Dictionary or encyclopedia. Neither. I'll use my cell phone. The writer, I would like to write my biography. Let's just say myself. I do not highlight in my books. I absolutely do not highlight in my books. If I donate them, which I do usually after I've read them a couple times, I like to leave them about the same way I purchased them in, so I definitely don't highlight. I do not write in my books either, which is the number 33 question. Earliest memory of a library would be when I was about 11, 12, 13, and I went there and got my first library card and checked out a very thick book on Egyptology, which is kind of strange considering I was early teens. Yes, I would rather read about Amenhotep and Akhenaten, then I don't even know what the kids' books were at the time, but yeah. Last time I went to a library would be yesterday because my dog decided to eat a $28 brand new copy of Harry Turtledove's Dark Through Darkest Europe. So yeah, there was that one. She liked to eat books. Must have tasted good. She had a good time. I didn't, but hey. Have I ever accidentally stolen books from the library? Yes, I have. I've moved from Zanesville, and then I had to replace and pay for the books. So I don't know if that even counts. Ballpark, how many books do you own? Probably more than 250, less than 300. How many books do you think would make for a reasonable library? To each their own. That's what I have to say about that. So there's Sense and Sensibilities and Sea Monsters, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, etc. How do you feel about the phenomena? I've actually read 2 of them. It was Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter and Queen Victoria Demon Hunter. I thought they were both interesting, but the quality of the works were subpar. But I did read them, so I don't care for them. Horror trope you would like to see get more love. How about... I mean, there's zombie apocalypses, but you know what? In a lot of books and just about any media concerning the living dead, you never, ever see the actual fall of society. I would like to sit and read a book about the fall of society due to the zombie apocalypse. It's just not very common. I do believe Brian Keene wrote a few books in relationship to that, but it's not very common. So the fall of civilization, that would be interesting. A whole novel about watching mankind eat itself from the inside out. Something that you think gets underutilized in sci-fi. Long, drawn-out explanations of how this technology works. That would be fun. Flash fiction, form of and format of literature, or it's just a short story dummy. Form of and format of literature, or it's just a short story dummy. I have no clue what that means. That makes no sense. 43. If you could own one book from all of history, what would it be? I'd have to say that... let's see. The Book of the Wars of the Lord. It's mentioned in I think in the Old or New Testament. It's a chronology of all the battles that God fought for the Israelites. It's been lost, and I would love to have a copy of that, preferably in whatever language it was written in. The Book of the Wars of God, or the Book of the Wars of Yahweh, something like that, yeah. Of course, no one else has heard of it. Audiobooks, the same as reading. They are not. I believe they use different psychological methods, but they induce the same thing. Audiobooks, I use them about 50% of the time when I'm going for walks and just house cleaning. But I prefer good old-fashioned paper and ink. Most literary songwriter of your lifetime. I have no idea. I was going to say John Lennon, but he died before I was born. But let's just say John Lennon. Paul McCartney, he's still alive. He's a good songwriter. What writer embarrasses you the most because you haven't read them? I'm not embarrassed by anything because I haven't read it. If I haven't read it, it's because I didn't want to read it. And then 47, same question rephrased. What writer embarrasses you because you've read too much from them? You know what? Most people don't even read. If you're reading any writer, why would you be embarrassed to read anything they've written? Nope. I think they said the average American reads 4 books a year. So if you read 5 books by one author, congratulations to you. You just beat the American average. What is a biography you are looking forward to reading? I'm not looking forward to reading a biography. Like I said, I usually don't plan my books out. I usually just grab the next one. I do have a copy of Gandhi somewhere around here, written by it's around here. Written by William L. Shear, I believe. I just can't find it. It's here somewhere. Right here. This is probably it. Gandhi by William L. Shear. He also wrote The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. So I'm looking forward to this. That's the biography I'm looking forward to. So there, I just planned one out. Even though it took me 40 minutes to find it. Sorry for that one. Do you have a dream reading cubby? No. How do you read in a dream? That's the question. No, I do not have a dream reading cubby. I read when and where there's a possibility of having silence. Last literary phenomenon that really got your gears grinding. How about the erotica written by, what is it, E.L. James, that 50 Shades of Grey? Yeah, that was just some nasty stuff. I don't know. I think I picked up the first one at the library, and I'm like, oh my. And George Takei and William Shatner at that point. And I'm like, yep, not reading this. Just replace Christian Grey with William Shatner and whatever the other girl's name was with George Takei, and I guarantee you will not like that book. I even forget somebody made a comedy about that. Actually, it was George Takei, so that's where that reference is. But I don't read erotica, so not my cup of tea. Don't even read romance. Erotica, ugh. What was the last piece of literature that changed the way you read? Nothing changes the way I read. What was the last piece of literature that changed the way I think? I'll reword that, and I will say The Eighth Tower by John Keel. That was a good book. It really blew my mind. It's a paradigm-shifting book, which I like to read a lot of. What booktuber have you been watching the most recently? I don't know. I go back and forth. But what booktuber? I like to watch Dane Cobain, Time for Books, and definitely Todd the Librarian. And I thank you, Todd, for commenting on my last video, and letting me know about this. Thanks for the encouragement, and feel free to like and subscribe. God bless you, or whatever you believe in. May the universal powers, whatever. Satan, Lucifer. They're all the same, right? Alright, I'd also like to thank Stripped Cover Lit for creating this tag, although it would definitely make a lawyer blush. Have a good night. Auf Wiedersehen.